Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We have a great guest today. I'll just ask her to say hi right now before I introduce this wonderful woman. Hello, Devlin. How are you doing today?
Hello, Egberto. I've been looking at your energy and the speed with which you speak. I can tell there's a lot to say today.
Well, great. I just have to fix our echo problem, and once I fix our echo problem, I'll be fine. But, I mean, we are going to talk about, what's kind of afflicting the country right now, and all of us know what's afflicting the country, the gun issues. Now, the idea is, how are we going to solve this type of problem? And people like myself have one way of dealing with things, but I'll be honest with you, and as much as I wouldn't admit it to most of my folks on the left, I like some of the what Devlin is going to have to say today. She's going to have some interesting facts, and she's going to have some interesting tenets to talk about today. Anyhow, the name of the show today, which she won't like, is How Many More Murdered Loved Ones Before Insane Gun Ideology Dumped? That is the title of the show. And for any of Devlin's friends and any of Devlin's associates who knows her, she had absolutely nothing to do with the title of the post. Subtitle of our show today is Americans' Lack of Empathy, a Hindrance to Sensible Gun Control. Now, folks, are you tired of seeing dead Americans gunned down without the ability to defend themselves? Should not your government protect you from predatory industries? One must realize that these killings are positive for gun industries, even if it isn't immediately apparent. It is on the same level of the predatory nature of healthcare, where industry depends on sick people or the fear of death to be more profitable. Where does it end? When does it end? It should end here. It ends when Americans first understand that, in fact, they are worthy, and that the government is really, really, really we the people, and not an acquiescing to those we have been told are implicitly more worthy. But how do we get there when those really in the know are unable to penetrate the psyche of those who have been misled or willfully ignorant for political, personal, or some other gain? Now, to our guest. Devlin Molyneux is the former president of Coffee Party USA, and I can tell you she did an excellent job at Coffee Party USA. She took it to the next level. She's a managing partner of Living Room Conversations, and she's co-founder of Bridge Alliance, and have been working tirelessly to frame a narrative, a messaging methodology that breaks down the walls that are preventing Americans from talking to each other on issues that matter to us all. She takes a decidedly nonpartisan, anybody who knows this show know that that isn't necessarily the case all of the times, but she takes a decidedly nonpartisan approach to issues and continues to fight pressures from the right and the left sides of the political reality. Puts her in a difficult spot, but that's where she's sandwiched. I'm sorry, Devlin. If we are to heal and move forward as one nation, we better hope Devlin and those working in her sphere are successful. Look, I want to be successful like anybody else on the left side of the equation, but if we are to really get anywhere, we have to have that moderating factor, the factor that is Devlin. Devlin, welcome to Politics Done Right. It is my pleasure to have you on board.
Yeah, thank you, Egberto. Thanks. Lovely to be here. And boy, what a lead-in. And I think the first thing that I want to start with is just a little story about something that showed up in my email box this morning.
Sure.
So I work with this, or have worked in the past with this group called The Power of TED, and powerofted.com if you want to look it up. And they send out a weekly email just like a lot of folks do that just is kind of like a little drips of wisdom here and there. And so today, the headline on their newsletter was "Problems Stick Like Velcro." True. And they went on in their newsletter to share this story about an executive who took on this new leadership role. In his first meeting with the staff, he asked the staff to tell him what the problems were that they were facing so that they could start working on the problems. He wanted to, make a good impression for this leadership role he was in. And the staff kind of looked around at each other and they were confused and they didn't quite know how to respond. So they, gave him a few dribbles of things that were kind of problematic. And every subsequent meeting, they went back and focused on these problems. And over the next 2 months, the problems got bigger and bigger, and the job satisfaction amongst the staff decreased. And the point of this all was to say that if we focus on the problems constantly, we're going to get more problems. And when we actually start looking at and asking ourselves, what is it that we want? That actually pulls us in a different direction than trying to solve for the problems that we don't want to have. And so just within your framing even of setting up the show today, Egberto, I want to come back to you and say, what is it that you want when you hear about something that happened in Florida? There's like this natural response that we have to fix this. There's a problem here. It's called school shootings and massacres and gun violence, and we have to fix it. But where is our attention actually placed? And that is a question for you.
Well, when I came, you notice how I brought it in and said I gave it a title that I know you wouldn't like, and it was to set you up.
Yeah.
Okay, because knowing that I was going to have you on, normally I would have put a moderating title on it, but I wanted the audience to see a response from somebody like yourself to a title that had some hyperbole in it. Mm-hmm. And have you counteract what you see as the problem of, whether you're on the left or the right, why it is that is probably an issue. Let me just, in a little bit.
The question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just asked you, I wanted you to answer the question. What is it that you want to achieve?
What I really want to achieve, it's twofold, right? Mm-hmm. The first thing I want to achieve is an impossibility. I hate guns. I don't like guns. I don't think anybody should have guns. And for those who say they have a Second Amendment right, my answer to them is because you have the possibility of using the guns and evidence has proven that that gun is going to be used on one of your relatives or on somebody who don't deserve to be shot. Just like we have controls on alcohol, on certain types of medicines, we should have controls on guns. That is an impossibility based on today's politics. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on as somebody who kind of looks at the picture and say, well, where can we look here? And just like you brought up the email in your box, where can we look here to be a solution? Before I ask you to come back at this, Debbie-Lynn, my show today was supposed to be a show that was just showing righteous indignation. Mm-hmm. And I was going to go solo, and I was going to have all the numbers, and I was going to be right.
Absolutely. I
was absolutely going to be right. But there's something else that I've always told my audience, and that is right is not enough. Mm-hmm. It's not good enough to be just right. It has to be more than that. And henceforth, Debbie-Lynn Molyneux.
Well, and I appreciate that, Egberto, and I appreciate you not adding to the fuel of the righteous indignation that we're living within, in our culture today. There's a time and a place for that, but what I want to get back to is let's talk about to me the actual question is not how do we prevent school shootings. That's the problem. The problem, and what you actually beautifully outlined, what you want for the future is to get rid of the problem.
Exactly.
Right? What I want for the future is to have a society where the young children among us are protected and provided with a healthy opportunity to live their lives and be the best they can be.
Okay.
I'm going to bring in another story here, and I'll be as brief as I can, Humberto, so I'm not just like holding
No, I
court.
understand, but before you go, let me just make sure and check to see if anybody have any questions online for you. And also, folks, please do remember, this is a call-in show, 646-716-5812. Again, that number is 646-716-5812. Go ahead, Devlin, because I have to.
So there was a story that came out last fall about the drop of teen use of alcohol and drugs in Iceland. Mm-hmm. Now, Iceland is a small country. It's like 350,000 people in the whole country. So they took a look and they said, wow, we have like 42% of our kids are drinking at least once a week or something like that. And I don't remember all the exact stats, but it was a problem, and it was growing, and the drug use was up. And they went back and they actually like talked to the teenagers and said, what is it going to take? Why is it that you're doing this? And it turned out that they were bored. They didn't have activities to do after school. They didn't have places to go hang out with their friends that were safe environments. So they ended up carousing the streets, drinking and doing drugs. Iceland as a whole, like this is the whole country, said we need to provide a better place for our kids, and actually address these issues that they're bringing up to us through their drug and alcohol use. So they now have investments into after-school programs. They have parents making commitments to spend one-on-one time with their kids. They basically restructured and rejiggered their whole societal norms to address the problem rather than punishing the kids for drinking and doing drugs.
Now, let me ask you something, Devlin, because Bruce has something that I think I'd like to expand on. He says, where is the love and family values? I am afraid I will become a religious fanatic. And what do I want to expand on to what Bruce said? I'd like to put it this way. One of the issues we have here is a lot of these things you're talking about. I love that you mentioned that in Iceland the kids were bored, and so what the government did was made provisions, made programs, created governmental programs to make them not bored anymore.
The citizens asked for it. The citizens asked the government to take the lead, and so they worked together. Exactly.
Now, let's bring that to America. What we have here is the same. And I have to go a bit partisan here, so forgive me, and I know you'll twist it away. But we have a party whose sole purpose is not to spend on social programs, and whose sole purpose is to maintain things like, again, gun control, and at the same time to not follow policies that avoid teen pregnancies and all these sort of things. So we have a family values parties in the minds of many of my listeners that are so far away from doing things to foment family or to feature families. How do we handle working with these types of people?
Well, and I really want to point out here that what you're pointing to is actually an American ideal of individualism. Mm-hmm. And our system is set up to provide the most individual freedom and choice. What it also does is it privileges people who are already well off in the system, and we don't have an acknowledgement or we don't acknowledge the symbiotic nature of the community and the individual. So where other countries who operate from a more community mindset have these larger social programs to help everyone, our country has said, no, it's all personal responsibility and everybody's on their own, bootstrap it. And what I'm saying and what I'm proposing is, why don't we have some community conversations and ask each other what kind of a community we want to live in, and then build that. Build the community we want to live in and do it in the spirit of community, not to take away from individualism and personal responsibility, because we have that too. But we're missing this community component of cooperation. And right now, folks in the Republican Party see the government as being forceful and trying to make them do something they don't want to do. And the Democrats seem to think that corporations have stolen our government and are going to take all the money for themselves. And what's missing in there is the actual community conversation piece.
Now, let me ask you, though, before you get into a community conversation piece, don't you have to agree on reality?
I don't think so.
Okay, and explain.
what I actually find in talking with folks who have different perspectives than I do, and that's just about everybody out there, what I find is that when I sit down and talk with folks, and I'm going to pull out a living room conversations, guns and responsibility. When we start with the questions on the topic.
Before that, I think you used the word living room conversations 2 or 3 times before, and our audience hadn't a clue what living room conversations are.
Thank you, Big Berto. Livingroomconversations.org is a conversation, provides 60 different topic guides for people to sit down with 6 folks of diverse perspectives and have a meaningful conversation. And it's really powerful in a way that debate is not. Debate is all about persuasion, and I'm right and you're wrong, and somebody's going to win at the end. And our country does that by default. What living room conversations is an actual way to hear where other people's beliefs come from. And it's learning, and this is why I don't think we have to have that shared reality to start the conversation, Egberto. Mm-hmm. Because if I were to ask you, where did you first learn about guns and from whom did you learn it? Is there a story that comes to mind from your own life?
No, that's the thing. My life is we've been anti-gun from the country that I came from,
So you probably learned something from your parents about how bad guns were.
Yes, absolutely so.
And my story is about, the rifle that used to hang over the door to the kitchen that was my grandfather's, and the kids all knew not to touch it, but it was there as part of his, I don't know if it wasn't really war memorabilia, but it was considered, he grew up on a farm in Kansas, and so everybody had a shotgun or a rifle or something like that, and it was just kind of part of life. It wasn't a big deal. Mm-hmm. I've heard other stories of people who talk about the bonding that they have with their fathers going hunting, and that was their first experience of firearms. So everybody has some level of story about that. Mm-hmm. And once you get into where did we learn about guns and what, and from whom did we learn it, it actually brings us a little bit closer together because we have different stories that brought us to our current reality.
Great. I have some items from the Facebook page, but before I want to remind folks that not because you see a conversation between Devlin and myself mean that you can't call in and ask Devlin questions or myself questions, or if you don't have a question, you want to make a statement on air so that other folks hear that you disagree with Devlin or you disagree with me or you disagree with both of us, then please go ahead and call in 646-716-5812. Don't fear. 646-716-5812. Okay, Michael Rudwin says, Devlin Molyneux, you're mistaken that Democrats think government has been stolen by corporations. With the exception of progressives who are about big money corruption, Democrats are just as bought as the Republicans are. And before
I actually agree with Michael on that one.
With this person. I've been fighting the establishment Democratic Party as being a neoliberal extension of the moderate Republican for a long time. So, Michael, I don't think she's wrong. I think knowing her, she's believed that for quite a while.
Absolutely.
Now, Bruce says, mental illness is such an unpredictable illness that, you're scrolling on me. It's such an unpredictable illness. Where is he? Okay. Illness that unless someone who cares about you is there at the moment, you can go off the edge. With all the suicides and those massacres. And he's right. And, let's centralizing a little bit on guns as opposed to the more expansive argument or discussion that you... Go ahead.
I just have to weigh in here because what Bruce said is absolutely right, and I want to acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. And if we look at what we want, where we have healthy, thriving communities that give kids opportunities, mm-hmm. mental illness is addressed in that statement of what we want also.
Okay. Good.
Or mental health in that case.
No, I get that. The other thing that I think I wanted to add to that, but I forgot what I wanted to add. But that's okay. I'll go to the other person. If safety is... I was talking about centralizing on guns proper and using what Bruce just said. That's what where I really wanted to go. And one of the reasons we said guns are special is exactly one of the reasons that Bruce gave, right? We don't know when certain people are going to go off, et cetera, et cetera. So the reality is no laws absent strict gun controls really work. I mean, it sounds like it's not something you can really argue, right?
So we're talking about two different things here, Egberto.
Okay.
You're still focused on the problems of guns.
Right, I am.
And I'm saying, what if we ask a different question? Instead of trying to fix the gun problem, what if we set up and establish and create the communities we want to live in?
Are you then saying that your expectation is that if these communities exist, it'll moot the gun problem altogether?
Absolutely.
Okay, explain.
Because right now what I see just from my kind of, pop psychology background and some of my coaching and just living a long time, what I see is that we are letting our kids down. We're not making sure that every kid has a safety net under them and a sense of belonging to a community. The reason that our young girls are having eating disorders is because they don't feel like they have a place in this world. There's not enough. There's an expectation that they can't meet, and the boys are suffering from the same thing. There's an expectation of how they should succeed, and when they fall short of it, instead of us having a safety net under them, having a healthy community in which they belong and they know what they can contribute, they're unable to contribute, they're unable to win, and they become angry. And so we have, our young white kids are out there shooting up schools, young men. Some of the other men are joining ISIS, and others are blowing up buildings. And there's something, what I'm saying is that there's something culturally missing for us in the United States that is putting our young people at risk.
Okay, we lost Devlin. Devlin, you just have to reconnect, and I guess just as she's making that particular comment, we lost her. I think she is back. There we go.
Where did I lose you? So what I'm saying is that because our communities are missing a healthy, are not healthy for our young people, we are having, the guns are part of that problem. Mental illness is part of that problem. Addiction is part of that problem. These are all problems arising out of a lack of healthy community.
Norman Bunk probably has something in that regards. Here, he has two statements I think should be read together. The first one, he says, genius, empathy is key. Also, if we can laugh together, humor is most mature form of empathy, and I don't know what the other word is, kohut. Then he says, it's not just boredom. The boredom comes from a sense of lack of purpose, which is
what I just
said, lack of purpose. Most people don't realize children need a sense of purpose. For children, this is friends' sense of belonging, meeting benchmarks in growing up, etc. Also, seniors also need purpose. Just keeping children busy is not enough. They must feel that they are needed. Prayers. It's interesting, Devlin, because I have a piece that I've placed on Coffee Party, and actually I've rerun it on Coffee Party several times, and every time I run it, it gets some good views, and that is, Americans don't know their worth. It so happened that the angle that I'm taking up is from an economic standpoint, meaning Americans don't think they're worth what Bill Gates is worth, when it is they who've created Bill Gates. But I think you take it one step further in that it is more than just about the economy. It's about socialization. It's about quite a lot more.
Ultimately, it's about belonging and contributing to something larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see what else here I want to get to. I think in 2008, this is going back to guns, Rudin, I think that before 2008, guns ownership required either being a part of the military, National Guard, police officer, part of a regulated state militia, or otherwise trained and licensed. The Supreme Court screwed up when they shifted the laws to personal ownership with their Heller decision. But isn't it true that the Heller decision also said that it could be regulated? Things like assault weapons could be regulated.
I am not familiar with the Heller decision that he's referring to. I don't believe there were so there were restrictions on assault rifles, on assault weaponry. Probably prior to that, I think that's probably what he's referring to.
Right.
And that opened up, probably through influence from the NRA, opened up, assault style weapons to standard issue, to any everyday people. And, and yes, there is people who are in the gun culture have a sense of belonging in that community as well. So we talk about wanting to belong and make contributions, and people belong to gangs, and they belong to a lot of things that aren't healthy because the healthy alternative isn't available to them.
Right. Jack Corvide has a interesting one-liner that I love. If safety is a human right, then guns that harm us should not be allowed. Refute that, please.
Well, I don't know that I disagree with it. I mean, I was arguing with somebody on Facebook yesterday about civil rights and gun ownership being a civil right, and I'm like, well, so is safety. I don't think this gets back to that individual versus community, symbiosis that we have out. What I think is out of balance right now. I think we've swung so far over to the individual rights, which means I have the right to do what I want. And we haven't equally backed it up with a do no harm clause from the community, or how does it enhance the community, if you will?
I mean, in as much as you mentioned that we become very individualistic. I mean, it turns out that only occurs not in real, right? I mean, only for those small people, because whenever let's look at it. I don't want to change the subject, but I just have to bring that in.
I could go so many places with this.
Go one of your places. I'm curious if you're going to intersect with mine.
So one of the things that was so enlightened, in the American Enlightenment about the founding of this country was the separation of and the priority of the individual over the community and self-governance over the monarchy. Those were kind of really wild, radical thoughts back in the day by this group of, 30-year-old white landowners. And I don't think that we have evolved that much beyond that today. So we haven't taken it back. We went from dependence on a monarch to independence, everybody for themselves, and we haven't really graduated or evolved yet to interdependence.
Do you really think, though, that it is everybody for themselves, or it is everybody for a small select few? Which one do you think is more accurate?
Are you giving me two choices, and I'm probably going to pick something else?
That's you, all right. Let me hear something else. I won't force you into the dual.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking in broad generalities.
Right.
Culturally, our country supports I'm in it for myself more than any other system.
Exactly.
And so the ways that the system then collects concentrates the wealth is that people appeal to and manipulate us to think we're going to get ahead on an individual basis, whether that's true or not, whether it's the new car or the bigger house or whatever. We do that kind of keeping up with the Joneses and going deeper into debt. At the same time, they're actually concentrating wealth based on our belief that we're getting ahead.
Which, in general, we are not. I mean, one of the economists that I put out there, Richard Wolff, many people consider him just a Marxist economist. He really isn't quite that. He makes mention of exactly what we've actually done. We've deaded ourselves into the semblance of prosperity.
Right.
Okay, let's see. We have Norman Bunk said, "I wish that." Let's see. I can't read that, but I can't read that one on air.
Oh, okay. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's probably one of the best ones. Okay, so let's go back and try to centralize on what occurred in Florida over the last few days. This is probably going to occur. Before folks do remember a call-in show again, I forgot to give you the numbers again. 646-716-5812. Do you have a question that you want to do live for Debbie Lynn? 646-716-5812. Okay, let's continue on the gun issue. And if people don't show an excitement for guns, what I'm going to then move on to is some of the more transpartisan and uniting things that you normally work on, which is something that I brought up before. But I really had wanted to do a centralization here on guns. So going back to what occurred in Florida and what's likely going to occur in the next few days, and the next few days, and the next few days, what should Americans really start doing? As I mentioned before, my show was going to be on what I think they should do. I want to first hear what you think they should do, then I'll tell you what I thought they should do.
Okay. I think that we all need to kind of look and see what can we personally do. I mean, let's take a real good look at what can we personally do. Can you volunteer for the Boys and Girls Clubs, for Big Brothers, Big Sisters? Can you help actually provide that safe community, social safety net for anyone in your life or anyone else in your community? These are things that we can do that would help prevent long-term school shooter situations. The kid who did the shooting in Florida was initially given up for adoption. His adoptive parents both died. He fell through the social safety net, and nobody, at least he seemed to feel like nobody gave a damn what if he lived or died. And then you throw in, whatever may have happened to him at school and not fitting in there. And we have such a punitive society. So this is the other thing people could do was, talk to your local school board, because I think our zero tolerance policies are actually contributing to more school shootings rather than lessening them.
Explain.
So a zero tolerance policy is where they say, if you bring any drugs into school, you're out of here. You're expelled. You bring a gun to school, you're expelled. And so what we end up with is a bunch of expelled students who are hurting and angry, who have probably been through a lot of trauma as children, and they have nothing to do or nowhere to go. Actually,
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point.
So this comes, for people who are keeping track of references out there, look up adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs for short. And they did a study that actually showed that children that have 3 or more ACEs, which are traumatic childhood experiences, people that are much more likely to have chronic health conditions as they get older. They're much more likely to end up in prison, have addiction, mental illness, all these things. We're traumatizing our children, and zero tolerance policies actually become another trauma instead of a solution.
I got you. Now, I'm going to tell you where I understand that, and I think I think what you're saying, if we were more caring society, if people spent more time with the kids, if mother and father didn't have to work and child didn't have to start at a McDonald's just to make ends meet because of where our society has gone, I think a whole lot of this wouldn't be happening. I mean, we just have to look back into the 60s, and this didn't happen in the 60s. We had domestic terrorism, but we didn't have this individual type of thing. Now, the thing that I believe is that reality is with us now. And also, I do believe that we have a gun manufacturing industry whose sole intent is to sell guns. So they make you fearful of the other. They do all the necessary things to populate you with guns. And if you have more guns, you have more of these events. Whereas your aim right now is to change minds and work in a logical, slow way where the whole society changes. I can't disagree with wanting to do that, but in the interim, while that is occurring, more of these events are going to continue to occur.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately. And again, none of us know what solution's going to work or anything of that nature, but my solution is to really look, most Americans support gun control, and most Americans, seeing the severity of what's occurring in this country with guns, want something done. I think, and now I'm going to hit on the progressive side of the thing, I think if progressives convince a whole lot of other folks to get out there on the streets continuously to say, we have to get a solution, being restriction on guns and banning certain guns altogether, I think it would be one proactive thing to get done. If somebody's seen with an AR-45, what is it, AR-47?
AR-15. It was what the kid used, yeah, or an AK.
I don't
There's an
even know
AK-47 and an AR-15.
Shows you how much I know about guns. I know nothing about guns. Okay, but anyhow, if we just go ahead and, you know, these things need to be banned. And the thing about it is it won't affect most people, because while we have more guns per capita, we don't have a whole lot of people that are just there hanging on to guns. That is an amazing thing. And given that we know how guns are used, so what you want to do is, I think, very important. You go ahead and you start. You want to change the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm saying the culture. I want to solve a problem where the culture is right now.
You want a quick fix, and I want a long-term solution.
Right, because
and they're both valid, by the
right.
way.
And the thing I don't want is I don't want to see more killings.
Right.
And what we're seeing is a whole lot of killings, unnecessarily so. And sadly, I'm sure that you would agree with the certain types of gun control policies today. And as most Americans.
Well, I mean, I don't think we need assault rifles in private hands. I think we do need to have better background checks. But there was an interesting article. The Washington Post did a fact check on a speech that Marco Rubio gave a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And Marco Rubio had made the claim in this speech that even had they passed gun laws after Sandy Hook, which was when we got the closest to having background checks approved for everybody, even if that had been the case, he said none of these mass shootings would have been prevented. And so Washington Post took him up on that and went back and researched it. Mm-hmm. And they found that there were, and I think they did 10 shootings. I don't remember the details. But I think they found that 8 of those shootings would have happened under legal circumstances, even if the new gun control laws and background checks had been in place. Mm-hmm. And 2 of them happened because there were errors in people not recording the gun sales or not doing the current background check.
So properly. He was more right than not.
He was more right than not. And I found that to be really both enlightening and discouraging at the same time. But it just showed me that the legislative solution is not necessarily going to work.
Well, whereas you said it was sort of disconcerting for you, as far as I'm concerned, it makes me happy, right? And the reason it makes me happy is that it shows that what you've, and I can't, this wouldn't pass, but outright banning is what's required on a lot of these issues, because it shows that absent that, you'll still have these people doing these things. I mean, you think about England. I mean, you would think England is the family values place. After all, they don't have these problems at all. Okay,
I thought you were going to go to Australia.
Well, Australia. It's funny because what Australia did is they took the bull by the horns, and they went ahead and they bought back guns, and they passed laws. And guess what happened? They got that dip in. They've had
no mass shootings since they restricted guns.
Exactly. But the reason I brought up Great Britain is Great Britain never ever had the issue, because in my estimation they were smart enough to say, we're not going to just have guns out there. But anyhow, we have Michael Rudin saying the quick fix is a buyback program, and that is what Australia did. The long-term solution is universal background checks, closing gun shows and that's a real one there, Michael. Closing gun show and private seller loopholes, because you can go to a gun show and without any kind of background checks go buy a gun from somebody else. And
depends on your state, but yes, in many states.
And the long-term in Texas, that's why they have gun shows every weekend. And then the long-term solution would take a generation to see effect, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't know. And I think, Michael, that is the long-term solution is what Devlin was actually talking about when she talks about changing the culture. But we need to change the culture on so many things. Guns is one thing, but there's so many other things. We need to change the economic system. But I won't go there.
None of them are perfect, Egberto. They all have problems.
I know. You see, what I want is a hybrid of, where capitalism worked perfectly, when socialism worked perfectly. What I told the show a couple of days ago is our economic system isn't divine. It is human-made. I used to say man-made until I was I was corrected by a woman who said, "Why the hell are you saying man-made?" And then I said, I got it. Human-made, human-made, human-made. Okay. Let's see if I have any more real quick before we go to the next subject, Evelyn. It's that I want to make sure to get all the folks covered that are watching, listening, and sharing. And folks, please do remember to share these shows. As I've mentioned several times before, Facebook, even though we have some people that don't believe it, has many of these stations by the throat. And why are they doing that? Because, well, I won't get there.
It's about the money, right, Egberto?
Listen to Devlin. It's about the money. It's
about the money. Hey, but let me just chime in here with a couple of other questions, just in case that sparks some more conversation.
Yes, go ahead.
What would happen, or what would it take for the NRA to become part of the solution? What would it take for the gun manufacturers to become part of the solution? And what might that look like? If there was other revenue streams for the NRA or for the gun manufacturers, how could that be implemented in such a way that it would actually become part of a healthy culture?
The thing about it is, I think if the NRA was a legitimate organization, meaning that it really cared about gun owners, that it really cared about protecting the rights of gun owners and so forth, I think that would be the case. But I think that is a marketing. I think the NRA is nothing more than a marketing arm to the industry. And if that is the case, they are just like any other corporation. Their fiduciary responsibility is the maximization of profits for whatever it is.
And they do that through manipulation and fear of us.
Exactly. So my question is, when you mention the case about how can we legitimize them by bringing them into the conversation, I think you bring them into the conversation at the risk of them attempting to manipulate where the conversation goes. And given how you see what I'm saying?
I know, I totally get it. And I'm just saying, because I work from a place of having every stakeholder in the room, if their profit becomes our concern too, not their existence. Would they soften? I don't know the answer to that question, but would they soften on a way to help us, become more responsible? Put the fingerprint things on the guns so that only the person who's the registered owner can fire them. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
If there is a group to do that, I'd leave it to your Bridge Alliance to build bridges there, okay?
Got it.
You can go ahead and use Bridge Alliance and get the NRA involved with there. I'd even put both of you, NRA and Bridge Alliance, on the show at the same time.
So just a quick plug on Bridge Alliance. Bridge Alliance is a group of 85 political reform-minded organizations working together outside of their silos because we realize there's no single silver bullet.
Man, you have that down packed.
Woohoo, I did it, didn't I?
You did it. Anyway, the perfect talking point. Okay, look, from Ron Cole. Sorry, Eddie, we've known each other for a long time, but I disagree with you and your guess. Not Eddie, buddy, Egberto. But anyway, I disagree with you.
Autocorrect, Egberto. It's autocorrect.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. But I disagree with you and your guess. My apologies up front. Look, that is a whole issue, and it has always been the issue with Politics Done Right. We don't come on the air to have people agree. In fact, one of the reasons I ask people to call in all the time is I want to have a dialogue as far as what you think. And if you, and you know what? Sometimes people call in here, Debilin, and they modify my thought process. And then if it happens on air, it happens on air. Sometimes they plant a seed and the next day I say, hey, you know what, guy, you were right. I mean, that is what it's all about. It's Bruce Pollard. I am afraid the U.S. is too full of guns for any short-term solutions. Your thought on that, Debilin? Is it too many guns to have any sort of short-term solution?
I forget. There's some small percentage of people that actually own all the guns in this country, and so I honestly don't know how we would get guns back from people, and I don't actually know that we want to. If we are successful in transitioning or transforming the culture, they become just relics.
Right. Okay. And let me bring up something that Michael Rudwin says now. Our founding fathers were wise, but they weren't prophets. They might not have been able to predict modern weaponry. Would they have accepted daily mass shootings?
Of course not. Of course that was never in their mind. What they were wary of was having just gotten having just fought a war in which the king sent troops to subdue the population and taxed us without any representation. They set up a system for self-governance whereby the people would always be in charge. And they, at that time, in the late 18th century, the way the people could be in charge was to have weaponry themselves.
Right.
And there's still people who feel that way today. They feel like the weapons are, having access to weapons and assault rifles and such is the only way to guarantee that the government that never overruns their civil rights.
And you know, it is a silly statement given that we have F-16s and all that sort of stuff now.
We can kill from drones now. You know, I'm not
Exactly.
sure how an AR-15 is going to protect somebody from a drone strike.
Well, it won't. Norman Bonk, we can't legislate decency. We can make sure the least among us, the most alienated, are welcomed into the fold. Love instead of punishment. Norman, I couldn't agree with you more. You're absolutely right on that. Do you want to expand on that while I search a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I think this gets back to the empathy that you opened the show with, Egberto, because, you know, I'm going to go off on neuroscience now.
Go ahead.
I love how you just say, go ahead, go ahead. You know, when we're living in that reptilian part of our brain that's at that survival level, that's the place where we are the most reactive and the most fearful about our survival.
Mm-hmm.
And when we move up into the liminal part of our brain, this is where the relationships actually help support us. We have that connectivity and emotional structure. So we have survival, and then we have, you know, relationships and connectivity. The rational part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, actually doesn't get engaged until our survival is assured and we know where we belong.
That is interesting. In other words, the reptilian part makes sure you live, and then the other part makes you think about, now that you're living.
Now let's make sure we belong.
Yes, okay.
And
yeah.
after those, so when those two parts of our brain are calm, then we can think rationally.
Okay, there's somebody that should have called in here because he said, who was it? He said, may I disagree with you on something? And the answer is yes.
Of course.
But if you want to disagree, call in and make your point. Don't ask me to look for it and read it.
What's the phone number again?
646-716-5812. We normally have 3 or 4 callers by now. 646-716-5812. And Devlin doesn't bite too hard. You know, she'll be nice to you. I promise you. She's a good person. Most of the times,
I'm
Devlin.
sorry, I just had this little Monty Python thing go through my head.
Oh God! Continuing. Okay, but yeah, well, since we don't have any more, I don't think we have any more commentaries that need to be read. And if I forgot to read anybody's commentary, like I just want to tell you that I've noticed that it's different on my pad than what shows up in the feed on the desktop. I have no idea why, but that has always been the case. But to mitigate that, you can always call 646-716-5812. It's not that I'm ignoring any question or anything on purpose. So let me go ahead now and ask Develina, I want to talk to you now about, with the few minutes that we have left, about talking to people, engaging people, what we've done at Coffee Party and what you've leveraged over to the Bridge Alliance as well as Living Room Conversation. You kind of schooled me today. I didn't realize that Living Conversations came out before Coffee Party. I'm sort of depressed on that.
You just want to claim that first status, that's all.
I want to claim the first status as Coffee Party. Are you kidding me?
So I forgot what the question was again.
The question is, tell us about I was going to use that intersectionality word, but I have been talking to progressives and saying, let's stop talking like that. Let's start talking in a manner that people really understand what we're talking about. So tell me about Coffee Party, on how its intent on engaging the body politic to have people communicate among each other, as well as how does that tie in with Bridge Alliance and Living Room Conversations?
It's like I gave you $20 or something to set me up.
Yes, I did.
So mark these dates on your calendar. Everybody listening, mark these dates on your calendar. April 20th to the 28th of this year is the National Week of Conversation. And this is where the intersectionality is going to come in.
Explain intersectionality to the group, please.
So this is just where we're all working on our separate silos, and we're going to intersect and do something all together. and because it's aligned and it serves all of us to do so. So April 20th to the 28th, we're hosting the National Week of Conversation. It takes place in your home, in your community, in your church, wherever you are. You can host a conversation or participate in a conversation during this week of conversations. This was an idea that happened a long time ago, and it was because actually after one of the school shootings, and I'm sorry to say I forget which one, I kept hearing people say, we need to have a national conversation about this. We need to talk about this some more in a bigger way. And so the idea kind of stuck in my head about what if we set aside 1 week a year where we just like talk to each other and purposefully seek out people who have different viewpoints and really try to understand. So we're hoping this year to have tens of thousands of people involved in conversations. Coffee Party is going to be hosting some on video conferencing. So that page will be up soon. Living Room Conversations has different communities around the country where they will be in-person conversations as well as video conversations. Bridge Alliance is helping coordinate the whole effort, and we've put up a landing page called nationalweekofconversation.org. You can go and register to participate and get all the updates. Nationalweekofconversation.org.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to type it out. It's long, but it was easier than trying to make people remember the...
Debbie-Lynn, if you could do the show a favor and put some of that information that you're putting right under this video in the on the Politics Done Right page, it would be great. Because what I want to do is, remember, and folks, let me just talk about a different hat that I wear elsewhere. At Coffee Party, I am working with trying to engage communities around the country. So, I'm going to want to leverage a whole lot of what we're doing here, and you'll see Debbie-Lynn on a few more times as this approach, as we try to get people talking to each other and communicating and going in a positive direction. Didn't mean to surf you. Go ahead and continue.
That's okay. Well, I just want to point out that, a lot of what we've been talking about today here is this blend of or building on activism. And what I've come to see over the 15 years or so that I've been involved in politics now is that most often people want to work at kind of like the point of the pyramid. They want to work at the place where legislation happens. But below the place where the legislation happens are the systems and structures that we have in place, and below that is the societal or cultural foundation, which is how we, as a community, communicate with one another to give a clear direction and then set up the systems that will give us what we want so that we can pass the legislation that provides the formal guidelines. And most people want to just work at that legislative level and ignore completely the relationship level or the structural level of our system. And it's a very complex system. And it's breaking down right now. I feel, and I know many people feel, that our democracy is actually at risk.
I do.
And part of why it's at risk is because we've ignored this foundational cultural level for about at least 50 years. And we started letting the marketers and the politicians and the campaigns slice us and dice us into all these different groups so that we have our own little tribe and everybody else is other. And we need to return to the restoration of our cultural norms by having us talk to each other and build an American identity that, yeah, we may squabble like siblings, but we still have each other's back. And right now, we don't. If there's a back turned to us, we're likely going to stick a knife in it. That's how it feels. And so restoring this public trust within each other, I think, is the foundational level upon which our structural changes will be made and upon which the new legislation should be based.
Now, I want to add something to what you're saying, and this is on you, really. Actually, a task that I'd like to throw on Bridge Alliance, on Living Room Conversations, and so forth, and that is everybody needs to feel that they are part of the game. And I think these organizations have to try above and beyond to penetrate every corner of this country. And what I mean by that, and it's not going to be only minorities I'm talking about here. I know I saw because I bring this up in several other commentary that we have or places that we talk. We have to be able. On my show, I have a thing where it says whenever we can unite the barrios, the ghettos, and Appalachia, then we would have won.
Yep.
Whenever we can unite the barrios, the ghettos, and Appalachia, we would have won. One of the things with a lot of the organizations like yours, those three organizations, they're very white, and they are very inclusive of people, well-meaning people that are doing a whole lot of good stuff. The question is, how do we break out in these organizations that we can include that guy in Timbuktu, Kentucky, that guy in this ghetto, this barrio? How do we do that? And that's on you guys, and you guys helping give direction to do that, because you can stay in your circle and work until it breaks out where all these other people are working for the same interest. We're not going to get a change made.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. And I'm going to rely on you to help with some of that
of
as
course,
well.
Of course, we are going to do our utmost best to get all of that done. And, we're coming close to the end of the show. So what I'm going to ask you for the next couple of minutes, if you will, tell us a little bit about how people can work with you, work with your organizations, so that we can go ahead and talk about moving our country forward.
Well, thanks, Egberto. I'll put some of these links that I'm about to mention in the comment stream as well. So I already put National Week of Conversations in there. One way that you can make a difference today is to have that conversation with somebody with a different viewpoint. It takes some courage. You might have a little social capital on the line, but do it anyway. And do it, with a mind towards curiosity. Don't try to change anybody's mind, but just, ask some questions. Some genuinely open questions about, like, oh, really, I didn't see things that way. How did you come to believe that? So find something you're curious about and ask those questions. Getting back to what we started the conversation with, Egberto, and talking about guns, gun control, school violence, etc. Volunteer in your community. Find a place where you fit in and you can make a contribution, because that will both help you feel better and less depressed, and it will also improve your community. The work I do is back to Coffee Party. You can get involved with Coffee Party at coffeepartyusa.com. You can work at the national level, which is what Egberto and I do, serving there on the board, or you can start a local coffee party chapter where you can regularly get together and meet with people and talk with them about your local issues. Living room conversations gives you a conversation guide, an actual guide to follow, so that your conversation will turn out well. Egberto, you've participated in some of these. There are different types of conversations.
I love them. I love the conversations.
Yeah, and there's over 60 topics prepared, so whatever you want to talk about, there's probably something there or close to it. A couple that I recommend starting with are righteous relationship is a good one to start with, especially if you have friends who get self-righteous in their politics. Relationships first, which really just is like talking about our relationships, etc. So you can get involved by having conversations and using those guides. And then Bridge Alliance is a little harder to get involved with as a volunteer, because we're a membership-based organization serving the 85 members, but definitely go on to bridgealliance.us. The website was down earlier today, so hopefully it's back up. But bridgealliance.us, and look at our 85 members and see if there's somebody else that you want to volunteer with. Represent Us, Issue 1, those are some money in politics places. Future 500, which works on building bridges between corporations and the environment. There's a lot of stuff to do, and a lot of them are working with colleges. Well, and I have to stop talking now.
Look, first of all, thank you so kindly for having been with us, Debbie-Lynn. It's long overdue. Debbie-Lynn does good work. Let's support her. She's going to put all those links underneath there. I had to decide today what kind of show I wanted to have. It was either going to be one where I was going to be showing the righteous indignation, or one where I got a bit measured went out when I saw your video on the Coffee Party USA, the Join the Coffee Party USA site today. I said, you know what? Today is going to be Debbie-Lynn's day on politics and rights. So I thank you so kindly for being here with us, Debbie-Lynn, and we'll see each other again, all right?
All right.
Okay, folks, thank you very much. Folks, this is one more edition of Politics Done Right. Don't forget, in order to keep progressive radio on air, in order to ensure that this message goes out, we need you to do several things. You must share, and what's the other thing again? Share, and also do not forget that we need your support. So always remember to support coffeepartyusa.com and also support politicsdoneright.com. If you want any information on that, there it is on your screen. And it is important that we do these things to ensure this stays alive. We cannot change the country. We won't change the country if we have those working outside of the mainstream media doing the work for you. So again, we thank Devlin for having been here on Politics Done Right with us. And you guys have Egberto is out.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EG.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
That is at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.